Hello, I'm Paul, and I have 4 tips of what you should and 4 tips of what you shouldn't do when doing business in China. So, the first thing that you definitely should do is you should bring gifts. Gifts are a big part of daily life in China. The Chinese exchange gifts on various occasions and rarely turn up at another person's house empty handed. Red packets, money in a red envelope, are regularly given out in China on birthdays, upon graduation, in a funeral, at weddings, during the New Year, and even when visiting someone in the hospital. This is in stark contrast to Western culture, where giving out money as a gift is typically seen as an insult. Want to impress your Chinese business contacts? Bring something small from your country like chocolates or a unique local product not available in China. So, the second tip that I have for you that you definitely should do when going to China is offer things more than once. It is important to offer things more than once when doing business in China because they consider it to be rude to accept a favor the first time that it's offered. For example, if you invite someone in China for a meeting and ask them if they would like some tea or coffee, they're very likely to say no and give a reason like they had some water on the way or they are not thirsty. But in fact, they actually would have liked some tea and coffee. They were taught that to be polite, they had to wait and be asked at least 3 times before accepting the favor. So the third thing that you definitely should do is you should exchange business cards. Business cards should be printed in Chinese on one side and English on the other. Pay attention to the style of writing. Simplified Chinese characters are to be used, and you should only use traditional Chinese characters if you're doing business in Taiwan and Hong Kong. So the final thing that you should definitely do when you're doing business in China is you should address the Chinese by their professional titles and last names. For instance, if the CEO of the company that you want to do business with is named Fa Ping, note that the Fa is the last name and Ping is the given name. You should address Fa Ping as Director Fa. If you don't know the professional title, Mr., Mrs., Miss, and a family name are accepted. Only use the given name if specifically asked. So now I have 4 cultural don'ts that you definitely shouldn't do when you're in China. So the first thing you should never do is you should never say no. The Chinese can be shy and tend to communicate indirectly. For example, there can be many different meanings behind yes and no. Should a disagreement occur, instead of saying no to face, they might say, yes, this is a good point, but I need to think about it. This is a strong no. A straight up no is perceived as being disrespectful and embarrassing to the other party. Similarly, if you should disagree with a Chinese person, pointing it out indirectly would be much appreciated. So the second thing that you should never do when doing business in China is never talk about business when eating. It is quite normal and common for Westerners to have breakfast and lunch meetings to discuss business. While in China, mealtime is for building relationships and having fun. Imagine if Chinese hosts invited a businessman for dinner with drinks and entertainment, but their guests started talking about businesses and selling their product. This would definitely put the hosts off. This is especially so over drinks. The thing is, verbal agreements just don't count the next day when you're doing business in China. So the third thing that you should definitely not do when doing business in China is don't overdress. When meeting Chinese business people, you should avoid overly fashionable clothes. You should dress conservatively, simple, unpretentious, and modest clothing is more suitable. Men should wear sports coats and ties and open-necked shirts in the summer. Women should wear dresses or pantsuits for business and avoid heavy makeup and a lot of jewelry. So then the last thing that you should definitely not do when doing business in China is don't be the first one to talk when there's a silence. The Chinese are comfortable with silences in conversation. After you've asked a question, it's worth pausing a little longer than you would in Canada. If you rush to fill a silence, you could miss the most interesting thing someone has to say. So I hope that you appreciated the tips I gave you, and I hope you have a nice day.